Eleanor Vale had always believed her life was built on honesty and devotion. A celebrated novelist whose books filled shelves across Manhattan's bookstores, she prided herself on understanding human nature, the quiet hesitations, the hidden motives, the tremor of guilt behind a lie. Yet, in her own home, she had been blind. It was just past 2 a.m. when she stirred from a restless sleep. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the city far below. Then came the sound. A low voice, muffled through the half-closed study door. "Victor." Her husband's tone was steady, almost rehearsed. She sat up listening, her heart suddenly pounding. She still suspects nothing. "It's almost done." The words sliced through the stillness like a blade. For a long moment, Eleanor couldn't breathe. She stared at the ceiling, her mind scrambling to interpret what she had just heard. Was he on a business call? Was it part of a script or a client meeting? But then she noticed the hour, 2:13 a.m. Victor never worked this late. She quietly slipped out of bed, her bare feet cold against the hardwood floor, and crept toward the slightly ajar door. The lamplight from the study spilled into the hallway, flickering faintly across the marble tiles. Inside, Victor was standing with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear, voice calm and confident, a tone she had never heard directed at her. "By tomorrow, the last transfer will be complete. After that, she'll have no idea what hit her." Eleanor's breath caught, her hands trembled, and a chill ran through her entire body. She stepped back, afraid the floor would creak and expose her. When Victor finally ended the call and returned to their bedroom, she lay perfectly still, her eyes shut, breathing slow and even. He slipped into bed beside her, the mattress sinking slightly under his weight. She felt his warmth next to her, familiar and foreign all at once. "Everything okay?" he murmured softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She forced a small smile without opening her eyes. Just couldn't sleep." He kissed her forehead gently, the way he always did. To anyone else, it would look like love. But to Eleanor, it felt like performance. As Victor drifted off, Eleanor lay awake, staring into the darkness. Her mind replayed the call again and again. She still suspects nothing. Now she did. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure if the man she loved was her greatest supporter, or her greatest threat. The morning light crept through the curtains, warm and deceptive, a soft glow that painted over the unease in Eleanor's chest. Victor was already dressed when she came downstairs, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone, perfectly composed. "Morning," he said, flashing that familiar, reassuring smile. It was the kind of smile that once comforted her, that made her believe everything between them was unshakable. But now, after the whispers of last night, that smile looked like a mask. She forced a pleasant tone. "Morning. Early start today? Just catching up on a few things. The market's opening soon." The market. Victor often spoke vaguely about investments, stocks, partnerships, real estate. He had always handled the finances, insisting it was easier that way, and she had never questioned him. She was the dreamer, the artist. He was the pragmatic one. It had worked, until now. When he left for the office, Eleanor sat alone at the breakfast table, untouched coffee cooling beside her. The apartment felt cavernous, echoing with the faint ticking of the wall clock. Something inside her urged her to look. She fetched her laptop, heart thudding, and opened their joint banking portal, a place she had never truly explored. Passwords auto-filled, loading bars turned, and then numbers appeared. Her breath caught. Transaction after transaction, small withdrawals, subtle transfers, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, each insignificant on its own, but together they formed a pattern. Over the past 3 months, nearly $240,000 had vanished. Her fingers hovered over the mouse, trembling slightly. Why would he need to move money like this? And hide it from me? She printed the statements and spread them across the table, pages of figures forming a silent accusation. Then she noticed the names of the receiving accounts, entities she didn't recognize. Ilium Holdings, VH Asset Group, Rowan Capital. Each name felt like a piece of a puzzle she didn't yet understand. That evening, when Victor returned, Eleanor was sitting on the sofa, the printouts neatly stacked on the coffee table. "Hey, you're home early," he said lightly, dropping his briefcase. "I was going through the bank records," she replied, keeping her tone even. There were withdrawals. Quite a few. For a fraction of a second, so quick most would have missed it, his eyes flickered with alarm. Then came the smile again, smooth and calm. "Oh, those?" He chuckled, taking a seat beside her. "Just a few small investments. You know how it is, trying to diversify a little." She studied his face. Not a single muscle betrayed him. His voice was perfectly modulated, his charm intact. But something deeper, something in the stillness of his gaze, told her he was lying. "I trust you," she said softly, folding the papers, and she smiled, because she knew he expected her to. But when he left the room, Eleanor's expression hardened. She slid the printouts into a leather folder and hid it inside her writing desk, beneath a manuscript draft. Trust had once been effortless. Now it was armor. She didn't yet know the meaning of Ilium Holdings or Rowan Capital, but instinct told her they weren't random. They were breadcrumbs, leading to something much larger and much darker. The morning began like any other, or so Eleanor thought. Victor rushed out for a meeting, coffee in hand, tie slightly askew. The front door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving only the faint echo of his polished shoes fading down the hall. For a while, the apartment was silent, save for the low hum of the refrigerator. Eleanor sat at her writing desk, staring at the blinking cursor on her laptop screen. Words wouldn't come. Her thoughts were elsewhere, on the missing money, the names of the shadowy companies, and that haunting whisper. She still suspects nothing. Then her phone buzzed. A reminder for lunch. As she reached for it, her gaze fell upon another phone, black, sleek and unfamiliar on the edge of the dining table. Victor's phone. Her pulse quickened. He never left it behind, not once in all their years together. It was practically glued to his hand, as if the device contained the very essence of his control. For a full minute, she just stared at it, her mind battling itself. "Don't look. You have to look. Don't become that kind of person." He already has. Her hand moved before her conscience could stop it. She picked it up. The screen came alive with a faint glow, no password. He must have unlocked it moments before leaving. It felt like the universe itself was giving her permission. She opened the messages. Dozens of threads, some with business contacts, others with names she didn't recognize. One caught her eye immediately, S. Rowan. She tapped it. The latest message sat at the top. Send her the Ilium files. Make sure she stays in the dark. Eleanor froze. Her heartbeat roared in her ears. She. That single word cut through her like a blade. It meant her. She scrolled up. Earlier messages painted a murky picture. References to timelines, transfers, and sealed documents. There was even one that read, "Once the assets shift to Ilium, there's no legal trace. She'll never know." The phone slipped slightly in her trembling hand. The word Ilium, the same as on the mysterious transactions. It wasn't a coincidence. A wave of nausea hit her, followed swiftly by something sharper. Clarity. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was betrayal, deliberate and precise. She took screenshots of everything, transferring them quickly to her own phone before returning Victor's exactly where it had been. Her hands shook, but her mind was calm, cold, focused. For hours she paced the apartment. Memories surfaced, dinners, vacations, whispered promises under candlelight. Every moment that once felt sacred now looked staged. She felt like a ghost haunting her own life. By late afternoon, the fear had burned itself out. What remained was something far stronger. Resolve. She couldn't confront him yet, not without protection. And there was only one person she trusted completely, one who knew both her heart and the brutal realities of law and money. Clara Monroe. An old college friend turned property attorney, Clara had always been the pragmatic counterpart to Eleanor's idealism. They hadn't spoken deeply in years, but bonds forged in truth never fully erode. Eleanor called her. When Clara answered, her voice was brisk as ever. "Ellie, it's been ages. What's wrong?" Eleanor hesitated for just a breath before replying, I think my husband is planning something involving my accounts. There was silence. Then Clara's tone sharpened. Come to my office. Bring everything you have. And Eleanor? Yes? Don't let him know you've seen anything. Not yet. Eleanor glanced toward the closed front door, the same door Victor had walked through that morning, unknowingly leaving behind the proof of his deceit. Her reflection caught in the mirror by the entryway. For the first time, she didn't see a wife. She saw a woman preparing for war. Clara Monroe's office overlooked the East River, a sleek, glass-walled fortress that reflected the city's gray skyline. To most, it was simply another corporate tower. But to Eleanor, stepping into it felt like crossing an invisible threshold, from naivety to strategy, from trust to survival. Clara greeted her with a brief hug, but her eyes were already scanning the folder Eleanor clutched to her chest. Inside were printed screenshots, bank statements, and notes scribbled in Eleanor's delicate handwriting. When Clara saw the message, "Send her the Ilium files. Make sure she stays in the dark," her expression hardened. "Victor's not just moving money," she said quietly. "He's preparing a clean split, probably a pre-divorce strategy." Eleanor's throat tightened. "You mean he's planning to take everything?" Clara sighed, closing the folder. "Not everything. Just whatever you let him reach. The withdrawals, the shell companies, they're all part of it. He's building a legal path to claim your assets once he files. The name Ilium could be a holding entity, possibly offshore. Smart move if you're a predator." Eleanor sank into the leather chair, her mind spinning. "I trusted him with everything. I never even checked our accounts until this week. That ends now." Clara's tone sharpened, professional and precise. "We'll take control before he does." Eleanor looked up, her eyes glistening. "How?" Clara leaned forward. "You have roughly $500 million spread across investments, royalties, and estates. We're going to place all of it under a protective trust, one he can't touch, challenge, or even locate. Once it's transferred, it's legally sealed. He can scream all he wants, but the money will be out of his reach. Is that even possible?" Eleanor whispered. Clara smiled faintly. "It's not just possible. It's legal if we act fast. We'll need to complete everything within 72 hours. For the next 3 days, Eleanor barely slept. She met with Clara's team in quiet conference rooms, signing documents under the hum of fluorescent lights. Each signature felt like a small rebellion, a reclaiming of her life, one page at a time. Offshore accounts were restructured, royalties redirected, and property deeds secured under the trust's name. By the second night, exhaustion gave way to clarity. She wasn't running anymore. She was preparing. On the third morning, Clara handed her the final folder. "It's done," she said. "As of 9:43 a.m., all of your assets are protected under the Vale Trust. Even if Victor files tomorrow, he'll find nothing." Eleanor exhaled slowly, the weight of weeks lifting off her chest. She looked out the window, the sunlight reflecting off the water like scattered glass. "Thank you," she murmured. Clara gave a small nod. "Just one thing, Ellie. Don't change your behavior. Don't act suspicious. Let him think you're still the loving, oblivious wife he can manipulate." That evening, Eleanor returned home before Victor. She set the table, lit a candle, and poured wine, the same way she always did on Fridays. When he walked through the door, briefcase in hand, he looked pleasantly surprised. "You're in a good mood," he said, kissing her cheek. "Why wouldn't I be?" she replied softly, smiling. "It's been a productive week." He chuckled, loosening his tie. "Mine, too." Their dinner passed like a performance. Laughter, routine, the illusion of normalcy. But beneath the polite conversation, Eleanor felt a strange calm. Every smile she gave him carried a quiet triumph. Every word hid a truth he'd never see coming. When he finally fell asleep beside her that night, she lay awake, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. The same man who once whispered about deceiving her now slept peacefully, unaware that the game had already ended. Eleanor turned her head slightly, watching the faint glow of the city lights filter through the curtains. For the first time in years, she felt powerful, and Victor Hale, the man who thought he was orchestrating her downfall, had no idea that every cent, every asset, and every trace of control had already slipped from his hands. She closed her eyes, whispering into the dark. "Stay in the dark, Victor. Just a little longer." 4 days passed. To Victor, those days were likely filled with anticipation, the final steps of a plan he believed was flawless. To Eleanor, they were days of silence, calculation, and perfect composure. On the morning of the 4th day, the autumn sun streamed softly into their Manhattan apartment. Eleanor was sitting by the window, editing a new manuscript, the first chapter of what she quietly titled The Betrayal Script. Her fingers trembled slightly over the keys. Not from fear, but from restraint. At 6:45 p.m., she heard the familiar sound of the elevator chime. Victor's footsteps followed, steady and confident. The door opened, and there he was, impeccably dressed. His tie straight, his face wearing the polite calm of a man about to deliver bad news with grace. "Ellie," he said, setting his briefcase on the counter. "We need to talk." She looked up, her expression unreadable. "Of course." "About what?" He opened the briefcase and pulled out a neat stack of papers, divorce documents, crisp and freshly printed. "I think it's time we part ways," he said smoothly, as if he were proposing a business merger instead of ending a marriage. "Things haven't been working for a while, and I'd rather handle this cleanly." Eleanor studied him in silence, her face calm, almost serene. "I've already made arrangements with my attorney," Victor continued. "Given our shared assets, it's only fair that everything is divided evenly. You'll be well taken care of course. Half of the portfolio should—" She interrupted softly. "Half?" He paused. "Yes, fairness." Her lips curved into a faint smile. She rose from her chair, the evening light glinting against the glass windows behind her. "Victor," she said slowly, "you won't be touching a single cent." For the first time since she'd met him, Victor's composure cracked. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor walked past him to the marble countertop and poured herself a glass of water. Her movements were deliberate, unhurried. She said, turning to face him. "I've already moved everything. Every account, every share, every property deed. All secured, all protected, legally." He blinked, his jaw tightening. "That's impossible. You wouldn't even know how to—" "I didn't have to," she interrupted again, her voice sharp as glass. "Clara Monroe did." The name hit him like a slap. His face drained of color. "She's very efficient," Eleanor continued, "and extremely thorough. I imagine she's also familiar with your little offshore project. Ilium, was it?" Victor froze. The mask was gone now, replaced by a flash of anger, then disbelief. "You went through my files?" "No," she said, smiling faintly. "You left them where any foolishly trusting wife could find them." The air between them thickened. Victor's hands clenched into fists, the papers still trembling slightly. "You think you've won? You can't just erase me from everything." "Oh, I didn't erase you," Eleanor said softly, stepping closer. "You erased yourself the moment you whispered that I suspected nothing." For a moment, neither of them moved. The city's hum echoed faintly through the glass. Sirens, laughter, the distant rush of cars. Victor finally broke the silence, his voice cold. "I'll see you in court." Eleanor tilted her head, her expression calm, even compassionate, the way an author might look at a doomed character she'd written to fail. "Try me," she said quietly. Then she turned away, leaving him standing alone in the center of the room, surrounded by his own arrogance. He stared after her, realizing too late that the woman he thought he could manipulate had just rewritten the ending of his story, without him. And for the first time in their marriage, Eleanor Vale had the final word. Victor Hale had always been a man who thrived on control of money, perception, and people. When that control was taken from him, something inside him fractured. At first, Eleanor thought his silence was a sign of defeat. But silence, she would soon learn, was only the calm before his storm. It began subtly. Whispers in social circles, murmurs at literary events. Her publisher called one morning, voice hesitant. "Eleanor, someone's been spreading rumors. They're saying you moved corporate funds into personal accounts before the divorce filing. Are you sure everything's in order? By the end of the week, articles appeared on anonymous blogs. Novelist under investigation for financial misconduct. The headlines were vague enough to evade libel laws, but damning enough to erode her credibility. Within days, her inbox filled with canceled interviews, sponsorships put on hold, and fans questioning her integrity online. Victor had found his weapon, not through lawyers or banks, but through reputation. Eleanor sat in her study one evening, scrolling through a torrent of online comments. Greedy fraud, fake philanthropist, another rich wife hiding her crimes. Her chest tightened, not from guilt, but from disbelief at how quickly the world could turn. She had lost control of the narrative, the one thing she thought she understood best. Then came the message from Clara. Clara Monroe, don't respond publicly. Let me handle it. We're going to end this properly. 2 hours later, Clara arrived at her apartment with a calm efficiency that cut through the chaos. She set a thick file on the table, printouts, digital screenshots, timestamps. Defamation, she said simply. And this time we're striking first. Clara's legal team filed a lawsuit within 48 hours, a detailed, devastating response outlining every lie, every manipulated claim, and every traceable IP address used to seed the rumors. The evidence pointed directly back to accounts tied to Victor's office. When the lawsuit hit the press, the narrative shifted overnight. The same tabloids that had crucified Eleanor now wrote about malicious disinformation amid a high-profile divorce. But Victor wasn't finished. 3 weeks later, new accusations surfaced, this time with supposed documents, bank statements, wire transfers, even a signature that appeared to be Eleanor's. Each file painted a story of deliberate financial deceit. And at the bottom of every one, a name reappeared. Silas Rowan. Clara's brows furrowed when she saw it. Rowan, that alias, Iliamro, he's been on the radar before. Financial fraud, shell accounts, corporate manipulation. Victor's getting desperate. They launched a private investigation. Clara's most trusted forensic analysts, working through encrypted servers and transaction logs. For a week, Eleanor barely left her apartment. She wrote to stay sane, fragments of her experience turning into raw, unfinished prose. They stole my name to write a lie. But I will rewrite the truth myself. On the 8th day, Clara called. Her voice carried something rare, satisfaction. Ellie, we got them. The evidence was undeniable. Every bank document Victor had provided was a forgery, generated using an editing suite purchased under an alias that traced back to Silas Rowan. IP. Logs showed that several of the files had even been edited from Victor's own office network when confronted. Through legal correspondence, Victor's attorney went silent. It was over. Eleanor stood by the window that evening, the city stretching below her in a wash of amber light. The air was cold, sharp, but cleansing. She realized then that Victor's cruelty wasn't about money, it was about power. The more she refused to break, the more he unraveled. Let him keep trying, she murmured to herself. Every move he makes just writes another chapter in his downfall. Behind her, Clara smiled faintly. You've already won, Eleanor. The rest is just paperwork. And as the night deepened over Manhattan, Eleanor felt something she hadn't felt in months. A quiet, grounded strength. The truth was no longer a fragile thing she had to protect. It was a weapon now. The courtroom was cold. Not in temperature, but in atmosphere. Marble floors, polished oak benches, and the faint hum of whispered tension. Eleanor Vale sat beside Clara Monroe at the plaintiff's table, her posture composed, her eyes fixed on the judge. Across the room, Victor Hale sat rigid, his confidence eroded, his gaze darting between his attorney and the floor. The case had stretched for months, a grueling parade of accusations and counterclaims. But Clara's team had built something impenetrable, a fortress of truth crafted from precision, patience, and irrefutable evidence. When the final hearing began, the judge's tone was clipped and decisive. After reviewing all materials presented, including the forensic, analyses, and the verified chain of custody for each financial document, this court finds no credible evidence to support Mr. Hale's claims of fraud. Eleanor didn't move. She simply listened, her fingers folded neatly on the table. The forged documents submitted to this court have been traced back to third-party manipulation. Tied to one Silas Rowan, also known under the alias Iliamro, the judge continued. This constitutes a deliberate attempt to mislead the court. All claims against Mrs. Vale are hereby dismissed. A pause. Then, furthermore, Mr. Hale will bear full responsibility for Mrs. Vale's legal expenses. The sound of the gavel echoed through the chamber. One sharp strike, and it was over. Victor exhaled sharply, his jaw tightening as if he were holding back a curse. His lawyer whispered something to him, but he didn't respond. The illusion of power that had defined him for years evaporated in that moment, replaced by the brittle fragility of defeat. Eleanor stood slowly, gathering her papers. For the first time since that midnight whisper, she felt weightless. Clara placed a hand on her shoulder, smiling softly. "You did it, Ellie." Eleanor turned her gaze toward Victor. He looked smaller now, not in stature but in presence. The man who had once orchestrated her downfall now couldn't even meet her eyes. Without a word, he walked out of the courtroom. The door closed behind him, the echo fading into silence. Silas Rowan never appeared again. His offshore networks vanished overnight, accounts frozen, aliases abandoned. Whether he fled or was silenced, no one knew. And Eleanor no longer cared. For her, victory didn't come with fanfare or applause. It came quietly, like dawn breaking after a long night, subtle, steady, inevitable. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor returned to her writing desk. The first page of her new novel bore a single line. The truth doesn't need to scream to be heard. She began to write not about betrayal, but about resilience, about how control, once reclaimed, becomes peace. Her walks through Central Park became her new ritual. The air was crisp, the leaves golden and brittle beneath her shoes. Some days she would pass by couples holding hands, their laughter light and easy. Other days, she would sit by the lake, watching reflections ripple across the water, and feel nothing but calm. One afternoon, Clara joined her on a bench overlooking the city skyline. "So," Clara asked with a small grin, "what's next for Eleanor Vale?" Eleanor smiled faintly. "Living on my own terms." She looked out at the water again, not with regret, not with bitterness, but with quiet clarity. The chaos was behind her. The fear had dissolved. All that remained was herself, and the steady rhythm of life continuing forward. She whispered the words that had come to define her journey. "Trust is a gift, but control over one's own life is a necessity." The sun dipped behind the buildings, scattering gold across the skyline, and for the first time in years, Eleanor Vale felt truly free, not because she had won against Victor Hale, but because she had finally reclaimed herself. The story didn't end with revenge. It ended with freedom, peace, and mastery over her heart, her voice, and her life.